Yeah. So Ben. Yep. Right. This one on this side. Push that down. Yeah. There you go. Oh, there we go. That's nice. All right. Good evening, everyone. I will call this meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. For folks who are watching at home, please know that we had a work session prior to this evening's board meeting, and we'll actually talk about what that work session was about later in the meeting. We're going to get reports from each individual board member from what they learned and what they observed. So with that, Dr. Ricky Smith, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are none, Chair.
All right, then I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Motion's been made. Is there a second? All right, motion has been made by Director Searchmead and seconded by Director Jaime. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a choral vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Our first agenda item of the evening is recognition and good news. And so I will pass it over to Lisa Burton.
Okay, good evening, everybody. And let me make sure Patty's gonna get our slide deck up. Okay. So good evening again, and we'll begin this evening with our recognition of Native American Heritage Month. And we want to begin with a land acknowledgement reading by Director Hymas.
All right. We acknowledge that we are gathered on the ancestral land of many tribal nations who made their home here and or traveled the Columbia River seasonally. The Confederate tribes of Warm Springs, the Umatilla, and the Yakima nations have a strong relationship to the region, as do the Confederate tribes of the Siouxs, the Confederate tribes of the Grand Ronde, and the Chinook tribe. In Tigard-Tualatin, we are situated on traditional Acknowledgement California lands. These lands were stolen by the federal government for settlers traveling the Oregon Trail long before they were legally ceded under deceptive and coercive conditions. First, in the unratified treaty of the 1851, and then in the ratified Willamette Treaty of 1855. Much more can be learned from the K-12 curriculum written by local tribal leaders, which we are implementing in our district. We solemnly reflect on the genocide and displacement of families and relatives. We commit ourselves to dismantling ongoing practices of settler colonialism and moving forward towards tribal sovereignty and reconciliation. We humbly look to Indigenous leadership on Indigenous lands. Shared from Dr. Julie Sparsa-Brown, adopted by Irina Mayonota from TTSD.
Thank you, Director Jaime. Okay, let me see if I can get this to work.
You have to hold it really close to your mouth.
I'm trying to get the,
Okay.
yeah, sorry, the slide deck, but yes, thank you. I'll hold it a little bit closer. Do I need to be closer to you, Patty? Not working. Okay. No, I'm sorry. All right, thank you, Patty. Okay. So go to the next slide, please. Okay. So our TTSD, a family affinity connection team, continues to build strong relationships with Oregon tribal leadership. And an example of this was a community presentation with Steph Littlebird, an artist, writer, and curator with the Grand Ronde Confederated Tribes this past spring. Ms. Littlebird shared what a land acknowledgement is and how important it is to reflect on the why and goals of holding one. And she shared this with our TTSD community in a virtual presentation last spring. Moving forward, Tualatin Middle School branding and identity process will include the same thoughtful and inclusive process. And the opening of Art Rec in elementary will also include a land acknowledgement. We just really thank our Native American community and want to make sure, in recognition of Native American Heritage Month, that we continue in everything we do in TTSD to recognize this community. So we now ask the school board to approve a resolution for Native American Heritage Month. I don't remember who's reading. Oh, yes, you can read the resolution. Thank you.
I will read it. So this is a resolution of the Tigard-Tualatin School Board of Directors recognizing National Native American Heritage Month and celebrating the heritages and cultures of Native Americans and the contributions of Native Americans to the United States. Whereas from November 1st, 2021 through November 30th, 2021, the United States celebrates National Native American Heritage Month, and whereas National Native American Heritage Month is an opportunity to consider and recognize the contributions of Native Americans to the history of the United States, and whereas Native Americans are descendants of the original indigenous inhabitants of what is now the United States, and whereas Native Americans maintain vibrant cultures and traditions and hold a deeply rooted sense of community, and whereas Native Americans have made distinct and important contributions to the United States and the rest of the world in many fields, including the fields of agriculture, medicine, music, language, and art, and whereas Native Americans have distinguished themselves as inventors, entrepreneurs, spiritual leaders, and scholars, and whereas the people of the United States have reason to honor the great achievements and contributions of Native Americans and their ancestors, now, therefore, be it resolved that the Tigard-Tualatin School District recognizes the month of November 2021 as National Native American Heritage Month.
Great. Thank you, Director Irvin.
Nice. Thank you, Director Irvin. So we could either entertain a motion or board members could make comments. Director Hemmings?
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you for doing this recognition. I know that this is very important to recognize that Native Americans are not a thing of the past. They're still here, and that, you know, they're have a lot of contributions to our society. Thank you.
Vice Chair Lynn?
Yes, I would agree with that. I think this is an important move to recognize not just the past, but also the present, and then to, I think, move forward with some engagement. I think that there are lots of opportunities to be engaged with our Indigenous partners. And so I'd like to see us move from this acknowledgement to that engagement and to that sharing, I think, of space and sharing of ideas. So thank you for this this gesture.
Director Irvin?
And I would just add that Steph Littlebird, I was at this session, and she has a current exhibit that's still at the Five Oaks Museum. And you can look at the virtual exhibit as well, and it's called This is Calapooian Land. And so that was something where a group of people created this exhibit that didn't have any Indigenous voices a part of that process. So you actually go in and you can see where the people, and Steph Littlebird was one of them, went in and edited and changed from sort of what that sort of colonist perspective of that history was into the Calapooian perspective, and it's incredible. So check that out.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that I have been contemplating a little bit about what I learned about Native American history, or I guess more importantly, didn't learn about Native American history having attended this district as a student. And I think our cultural understanding and discussions have changed a lot over the years. But I also know that I think it was in 1970 was the first day of mourning declared by Indigenous leaders in the Northeast, who were basically pushing back against the conventional narrative of what Thanksgiving is, as this idea of, oh, Native Americans taught pilgrims how to grow corn, and the history is obviously much more complex than that and darker. And so I think it's just important to recognize things that we've gotten wrong, and that's one that I was woefully unaware of until too late. So I think this is an important start. And as we head into Thanksgiving week, I think something we should all be thoughtful about. So with that, is there a motion?
I will make a motion to approve resolution 2122-10, recognizing the National Native American Heritage Month.
Motion's been made,
I would like to second.
and motion's been seconded by Director James, made by Director Zerschmidt. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll move to a choral vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right, the resolution has been approved. Thank you, Lisa, for putting that together for us. And with that, we will move on to our student representative reports. Who would like to go first today? Tigard High School it is.
The first thing that kind of came to my attention over the past couple of weeks has been students expressing concerns about bathroom closures. I know that there's been some graffiti going on and bathroom closures, yeah. And for a lot of students, they've expressed that to me as being super inconvenient already. There was a publications article about how it's like you have to walk around the entire campus to kind of find one sometimes. It can be almost all of them being shut down almost. So that was one thing that was expressed to me. And then some better news that's not so much better. Tigard lost to Roseburg, first round exit in the playoffs. That was fun. The new lunch schedule has been interesting as well. 7th period, which would be the period that I had second lunch, feels really long, like it never ends. But I think that for a lot of students, the new lunch schedule has been great. I like that kind of that we only have 2 as well. New SEL that was introduced to our leadership class, and we had a little thing on it in my 6th block. It looks really cool. I like how much more has been done with it and where it's kind of headed. There was a THS blood drive that also went really well. NHS put that on. It was received really well. It was as fun as a blood drive can be. I donated my own blood. That was fun. I like seeing so many people there. I was kind of surprised. There was a dodgeball tournament, and the important thing about the dodgeball tournament was the amount of students that showed up was ridiculous compared to every other year. It was huge turnout, and there was a first round upset actually at the tournament, and I've never seen that many students rush the court all at once for this little freshman girl who, as the Mr. Abel was there, and he was like, I felt like I might have to get her out of there because there were so many people rushing the court at once. It was crazy. And so that kind of brings it back down to being back in school has been stressful in some ways. I've heard a lot of I'm learning more actually this year, but also it's just been really fun being able to do the activities as well, like doing sports, doing dodgeball tournaments, doing movie nights, and then as well as theater had their first show. So that's also awesome. It's just good to see everybody back, and students have not been taking that for granted.
Okay, on the Tualatin side, school-related happenings, Q1 is over. And what I noticed from the first quarter and kind of the end of the quarter is that teachers have been super flexible and super understanding about due dates and students' different situations, which has been really nice and refreshing. And I hear that from everyone, regardless of grade. We also, the new math teacher that was hired recently, she resigned, and a new teacher has been hired for the affected students, with the exception of HL math students who have been assigned an existing member of the math department to be their teacher. As you can imagine, that's causing mountains of stress because we're in late November and they haven't had a consistent teacher since the start of the school year, especially to those full IB kids that are expected to take the HL math exam in May, which is not a lot of time, especially when they're counting on those points in order to be able to get the diploma. I was thinking about what Ben just said about how he was reflecting on what he learned from the district and what he didn't learn from the district about Indigenous people. And our newspaper has a column called What We Don't Learn in History in the opinion section. And I think you guys should check it out because it's a great way that shows how students are reflecting and thinking about
different things that they aren't taught in school. And I think that's really cool. Clue was the play that happened on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I went to it. It was incredible. It was so funny, and it was so nice to see my fellow students on stage, like doing what they love. And it's been a while since we've seen that, so that was awesome. And then this week, different clubs and student bodies like ASB, BSU, and Young Life are having their Friendsgiving celebrations. And it's the first time in like a year and a half that they're able to do that. So that's really awesome. December 1st from 5 to 9 p.m. is a dine out to support the Ivy Communicare program, which is a fundraiser that the full IB students junior class is doing, where they give out a grant at the end of the year. So that's on December 1st at the Nyberg Chipotle. And then starting after Thanksgiving break, we have a new bell schedule where we have a 15-minute break after first period, which is awesome because a lot of students don't come to school eating breakfast and they use that 15-minute break to eat breakfast. So it's nice that they'll have that opportunity again. And also our passing periods have been extended from 5 to 7 minutes, which was a huge complaint at the beginning of the year. So I think this will be really good. Sports update, our football team beat Summit in the quarterfinals at our last home game, which is awesome. And we're headed to the semis, which will be at Hillsborough Football Stadium this coming Friday. Winter sports have started up, and in recognition of Indigenous People Day, or People's Month rather, there are new signs going into all of the exits and entrances of 12th High School that state like this is Tigard-Tualatin land, and there's information, and I've seen lots of students stopping and looking at them. So that's really cool. And I think everyone's just really mindful of Indigenous Peoples Month headed into Thanksgiving. And that's all.
All right, thank you both. Any questions for the student directors? Okay.
Just appreciation to the students who signed up for the blood drive. That is hugely important, especially at a time like now when blood is in critical supply. So please do relay my thanks to those students you know who participated.
So, okay, then, oh yeah, Vice Chair Lynn.
You said that, Mahati, there was one math teacher was hired, but then there was another one that wasn't. Could you clarify?
Yeah, sure. So there was, starting at the beginning of the year, there wasn't a math teacher for one of our like blocks of classes, HL Math being one of them, IBHL Math being one of them. And then a new teacher was hired and she resigned. And then a new teacher was hired again for I think 6 out of the 7 periods. And for that 7th period, that is HL Math, they're just going to have an existing staff member teach them. So they're not going to have a new teacher. It'll just be a different staff member.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we will move to Superintendent and Board Communication, Dr. Ricky Smith.
Thank you. And Vice Chair, to that, you have received communication from me regarding the IB math situation at Tualatin High School. And so in conversation with Associate Principal Melissa on Friday evening, she continues to work closely with this transition and stated, number one, the teacher that is there now is showing to be an incredibly good fit, and that students are reporting to her as of Friday that they feel for the first time that they are getting the math instruction that they were looking for. So I believe that we are Tualatin's starting to experience a smoothing out of that situation. So just wanted to share that with you as well. And so thank you. This evening, a brief update regarding state mask and quarantine guidance in advance of what we anticipate will be another governor's press conference. First, we expect that the requirement for use of masks outdoors will be modified from required to strongly recommended. We will modify our district outdoor mask guidance based on pending state and Washington County public health guidance. Second, we expect the length of quarantines will be modified from 10 days to 7 days for students who are presumed or confirmed positive. To successfully complete a 7-day quarantine, positive students must have at least 2 negative tests on days 5, 6, and/or 7 of their quarantine period. Third, we expect state approval for this test to stay procedure for those students who have been exposed to someone who is positive and is asymptomatic. These students will be required to produce a minimum of 2 negative tests over a 7-day period to remain in school. TTSD Public Health Team has confirmed district rapid test buy next now stock to implement test to stay at school building levels. The test to stay procedure only applies to students who are exposed at school. It does not apply to students exposed in the community at large, such as youth sports, family gatherings, etc. The tentative timeline for implementation of the outdoor masking, the modified quarantine, and test to stay procedures is the week after Thanksgiving holiday, dependent on the receipt of state and Washington County public health guidance. We expect that indoor mask requirements will remain in place for the foreseeable future. The district has also held its first community partner vaccination clinic with Providence Medical Group at Tualatin last week. 100 pediatric first dose vaccines and 79 adult boosters were administered. TTSD will also host 2 more clinics in the coming weeks in partnership with Washington County Public Health. They will be hosted here at the Calapooia Center on December 12th and the 22nd. Information will be sent out to families with a link to pre-register. We will continue to seek out other opportunities to create access for our families and staff to both the pediatric vaccine as well as the boosters. And my thanks to Lisa Burton for all of her work in coordinating these clinics. And as this is the season of gratitude, my thanks to Directors Susan and Darren Bernard, who put an untold number of hours of work to transition our board meetings to their new home here at Calapooia. Thank you to Susan and Darren for making this happen. And I think a round of applause is in order. I also wish to thank Stace Shalito, District Security Manager, for his work with homeless community members that were found camping behind the district bus barn on Hall Street. His caring approach towards community members who are experiencing multiple personal and societal challenges was remarkable, not only in its effectiveness in meeting the City of Tigard's requirements for cleaning the campsite, but most importantly in getting these members to safe and established shelters. Many thanks, Stace. And again, congratulations to the Tualatin High School football team as they advance to the semifinals this Friday. They will play West Lynn for the opportunity to advance to the 6A finals on December 4th. And as a reminder, schools will be closed for the Thanksgiving holiday beginning Wednesday. And I want to wish all of the board and those who are with us this evening a wonderful and safe Thanksgiving holiday.
Still getting used to the new microphones, which are awesome, by the way. Board members, are there comments or questions for Dr. Reiki-Smith? If not, let's move into director updates. Who would like to go first? Director Zerschmied, we'll start and move down if that works for folks.
Okay. So lots going on. You can tell that we're in the meat of the year, more meetings than I can count, but I wanted to talk about a webinar that I attended last week, hosted by Colt Gill, with a snapshot of how schools are opening safely. And he talked about many things, but I wanted, for the sake of our parents watching at home and our students, to just list off a few highlights of things that he mentioned. One of the things that he said, which surprised me, was that last week, 20% of new COVID cases were in children under the age of 18. Mm-hmm. And while children don't get particularly sick from COVID, they are spreaders. And so even if your kid gets it and isn't terribly sick, they can still spread it to a whole lot of people in your family. All of which is just underline the importance of the vaccine. Now that kids are able to get the vaccination, I really encourage parents to do that for their kids. Colgill also talked about the vaccine mandate. I know board members have received lots of emails, as have I, from parents and community members and people across the greater Portland area who are concerned about us and other school districts putting down a vaccine mandate for students. And Colgill walked through what that vaccine mandate would have to look like in order for it to happen. In order for the state of Oregon to have a vaccine mandate, the vaccine must be in regular use, not in emergency use. So that's one step that the vaccine would have to take first. Second, then there would have to be a recommendation to a specific committee who would review that vaccine mandate. And that committee's work would take some time. It would be at least 3 or 4 months. And so while I can appreciate that some people are concerned about there being a vaccine mandate, even if we were to pull the trigger on it now, we couldn't. And it would be a long process. But so I want to reassure people there is no vaccine mandate coming down the pike anytime soon. But there is a vaccine plea from those of us in education that you get your kids vaccinated, you get yourselves vaccinated, you keep everybody safe and keep our schools open.
Thank you, Director Zerschmied. Director Urban.
Thank you. So I have attended a couple, along with Director Zerschmied, a couple of the health curriculum adoption and renewal committee meetings. And I'm going to try and do Director Robson proud when I explain some of the work that we're doing. So really the first couple have just sort of been calibrating our, really what this process is going to look like, but it's been really eye-opening. We have this incredible team of educators and cabinet members and board members and principals that are really coming together, and some instructional people as well, to really run this process. And, you know, a few things I think that are important to kind of understand as well. Some of us might know that there's 8 general anchor standards. There are over 900 performance indicators. Am I right so far, Doc? Okay. And it's wild to kind of look through some documents that ODE has created to really understand what those are, where those overlap, where we're seeing some gaps, and really start to prioritize what that looks like when we're kind of sending that down to our schools to teach. So we're not even at looking at curriculum yet. We're really looking at what those standards are. And so we had the opportunity just to kind of do kind of like a process that sort of underpins our work, which was to look at one standard and really see the performance indicators, which are how do we know students are learning what we want them to learn. And so it's been a really great process. I think we're going to come away with an incredibly rich and culturally responsive and equitably focused health curriculum at the end of this. And that's really exciting to me. So, and then the other thing was last weekend was the All Together Now choir and theater performance at Tigard High School. So it was really their comeback to theater and choir, and it was fantastic. So they had a program that really brought together a lot of just sort of a medley of different show tunes in a way. And so we had theater, we had soloists, we had the choir singing at the same time, kind of in the back of the stage, and it was a fantastic time. And I know how much the choir and theater teachers really were incredibly emotional about getting to be back and performing in front of a crowd, and the students were so grateful. So that was really exciting as well.
Sherilyn.
Yep, so I attended the Education Recovery Committee, which is a subcommittee of the Governor's Racial Justice Council. And that group is a diverse group of community stakeholders from around the state of Oregon, folks who have an interest in issues of racial justice, but also community leaders, right? So I have the fortune of serving on that. And what happens there is, and may have said this before, but we have folks from the major education divisions across the state come and share ideas, best practices. The groups that presented this past week are ODE, the Early Learning Division, the Youth Development Group, Educator Advancement Council, TSPC, and HEC. And they're all basically in the process of developing policy option packages, as well as legislative concepts that are going to be presented to the legislature for the next round. So they're interested in getting feedback and thoughts on that and thinking about where they might go. They asked us not to share the specifics yet because these are things that are not well formed. But as these legislative concepts and policy option packages get formed, I'd like to be able to share these ideas with you to get your input and hopefully make sure that TTSD has a voice at the table when it comes to thinking about the kind of legislation and kind of policies that would best serve our students.
Director Jaimes?
I attended the meeting for the Oregon School Board members color caucus, members of color caucus. That's what I meant to say. And you know, we talked about different things that the caucus is being involved in. One of them being House Bill 2001, where you know, it requires the school districts that are making reductions in educator staff positions to retain teachers with less seniority if they have more merit, or if retention of teachers is necessary to maintain a school district diversity ratio, which you know, I think we're going to be hearing from Director Reed later on. And so that's good. We talked about other things, but I think that's what the one thing that I came out from with from that meeting. And then I don't know if you guys have heard the Talking Tigard podcast, but if you haven't listened to it, I was the guest on that. And not much more to say other than that. I've been kind of preoccupied with some of the things that have been going on in Newburgh, where I work at. So yeah, that's all I have for you.
I've downloaded the podcast, but not yet listened, so I will get back to you on that.
All right.
Thank you, Director Jaimes. So just a couple quick notes from me. I wanted to echo Dr. Reiki Smith's comments about this Calapooya Center. 4 of the 5 board members were not here when this plan was drawn up and when voters passed the bond. But we are all able to enjoy this space and use it. And I know this space is going to be used by the district for many, many purposes, and ultimately it's going to save the district some money to be able to hold things in-house here. So wanted to again say thank you to voters and taxpayers and to the folks from the district and past board members who led those efforts. I know we're gearing up to do a long-range facilities planning committee, and this is a great example for us to be aiming towards because it truly is a beautiful space. Attended an OSBA board chair roundtable again. I think they're going to be holding them monthly, and it really is fascinating to hear. And Dr. Reiki Smith, I'm sure you're hearing from the superintendent side of things. There's challenges in our district, but there's some real challenges in other districts, as Director Jaimes alluded to. But I do feel fortunate about the consistency that we have in TTSD and the clarity I believe that we have in TTSD. There's some real challenges. Our teachers are stressed. Our students are, as we heard in our SIP plans, our students are dealing with a lot. But I do feel generally positive given what I'm hearing from our colleagues across the state. And then I also wanted to give a quick plug for the policy committee. Director Zerschmied and I met several times over the last month on policy committee, and are excited for those policies, our recommendations to be brought forward for the full board, and have all of our policies updated. So with that, are there any other comments from board members? All right, hearing none, we will move to our next agenda item. It is public comment. So is Valerie Johnson in the room? Hi, Valerie. So Valerie, in your email, you mentioned that you wanted to give public comment on agenda items and non-agenda items. You can speak during one public comment period. You can either choose the agenda items or non-agenda items. But if you want to speak on non-agenda items in your comments, you'll have to speak at the end of the meeting at the non-agenda item section. So I'll let you choose if you want to speak just to the agenda items right now, or if you'd rather hold until the end to speak towards both. Okay, well, you'll only get 3 minutes total. Okay. Okay, perfect. Then you can come on up to the microphone then. Perfect. And while you're doing that, I'll read the sort of rules of the road for this. So the Tigard-Tualatin School Board meetings are all public meetings, meaning that the business of the board is conducted in an open meeting for the public to observe as required by law. However, regular public comment at board meetings is a policy choice of the board and not a legal requirement. As the board values input from students, parents, and district community members that we serve, the board provides these opportunities for members of the community to provide input on important topics. In addition to public comment, community members may submit written comments to the board secretary, Patty Roberts, at each meeting or email comments directly to the board. Those email addresses can be found on the district's website. As I mentioned, this section of the agenda is just for public comments relative to a specific agenda item. Comments not about an agenda item will not be heard at this time. Your public comment will be limited to 3 minutes and should be brief and concise as directed in board policy. Speakers can offer objective criticism of district operations or programs, but again, we will not hear complaints concerning specific district personnel. And as Director Zerschmidt points out, we will also not be hearing praise of specific personnel. You can't mention specific people by name during this section. If the public comment agenda, or this won't be a problem here, this is just 30 minutes, and then the end is just 30 minutes. We have 1 hour total. Our ask is that you please wear your mask when you speak, but you'll see the microphone there. For us to hear you, you're gonna have to hold it very close to your mouth for it to be picked up in the audio system. Before your remarks, please share your zip code. Director Zerschmidt at the end has cards, so she'll be keeping track of the 3 minutes, and she'll give you, those cards will indicate how much time you have left. And if you would like your public comment to be reflected in the meeting minutes, please provide a written copy to our board secretary, Patty Roberts, found at the end of the table. And also please know this is an opportunity for the board to listen and not engage in dialogue. So with that, anything I missed, colleagues, or Dr. Ruby-Smith? Okay, then, oh yeah, do you have a question? Okay, sounds good.
I have the same problem with my mask and glasses. I think I've probably gone through 3 different kinds of masks to find one that doesn't fog up when I'm wearing my glasses.
Yes, yep. So when you begin reading is when Director Zerschmidt will start the timer, and you'll hear the timer go off. She'll leave it on so you can hear it.
Thanks for having me. I have a mixed race son. When he was 4 years old, my husband and I took him to a children's concert performed by the Oregon Symphony. As the orchestra members were taking their positions and the audience was settling in, my son leaned over to me and said, "Mom, there's no one here who looks like me." That comment changed my life. Whenever I walk into a room, even like this, I observe the people from my son's point of view. I know the pain of having a child come home crying because someone used the N-word to describe him. But I also know the pride of walking beside him and seeing people smile. Our skin color may not be the same, but we share the same values. One of those values is that we are created equal. I appreciate differences in people. I don't understand why those differences are being used by schools to segregate our children. One of the goals of TTSD is the recruitment and retention of staff of color in order to decrease diversity between staff and students. Apparently, white people are the barrier to achieving this. Is there an affinity group for someone like me, white people and others who put character above skin color? While you encourage colleagues of color, I suggest the encouragement of colleagues. At a previous meeting, there was a discussion about the need for substitute teachers. The only qualifications were that applicants be over 18 and pass a background check. It's no wonder that the graduation requirements for students have been lowered when we don't have teachers who are required to have a bachelor's degree. The taxpayers deserve better. Our children deserve the best. In hiring new teachers, will you base your decision on equity or equality? In my opening comments, I mentioned the Oregon Symphony. I believe a school board should function like a fine orchestra. An orchestra blends different instruments of equal value to produce harmony and unity. It is led by a conductor who encourages excellence. Please encourage excellence in one another and in our children, regardless of their skin color. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for your comments. And
Could I ask just that you did not give your zip code for the
Oh, yeah.
record? Could you- That's okay. Thank you.
thank you, Valerie. Okay, with that, to prepare for our next presentation, I'm going to take us on a 3-minute recess. So we'll take a 3-minute recess and come back in 3 minutes.
I hear you. Yeah. And I'm sticking close to it. I think masks should be required. All right, 1-minute warning, folks, 1 minute.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I will call the meeting back to order at 7:15. And with that, we will move on to the reports and discussions section of our agenda. And to lead us off, we will have a presentation on TTSD's recruitment and retainment update with presenter Len Reed. Len and Director Ebert.
Test, test. And we're on. Good evening. Both Debbie and I are excited to be here to speak to you on our workforce diversification and how things are going and what we're doing and just what we're working on. If we can get the slides. Huh? So in my 2 years, this is my third year with TTSD, I have learned that we have, if we go to the next slide, a goal in terms of our strategic plan to decrease the racial diversity between racially and linguistically between staff and students from 30.9 to 15%. And that was established in 2016. So I'm gonna put that in perspective. Since then, if we go to the next slide, we have what is called the Educator Equity Report. And that's a report that comes out annually and shows us the parity between our teachers and students and how well we are doing in terms of that work. So if you didn't know, we have an act in which says that, hey, school districts, we expect you to make sure that your student, your teaching staff, your body reflects your student body. So that is something that is a expectation of us. And so we are working hard to make that happen. In 2020, we had 44% students of color, and then 13% educators of color, 12 in admin. And then currently we have 47%. And as we're seeing is that we're seeing a steady increase in our student diversification and a slow increase. We're moving in that direction, but not at the rate in which our student diversification is growing. All right, so we're at 16% educators of color, 18% of administrators. And I can say, you can see that the diversification in terms of administrators is a lot of what you see in our district leadership, with a couple in our buildings. So when they look at that diversification, they're looking at teachers, licensed staff, they're looking at building administrators. All right, next slide. So what's important in terms of recruitment is our branding. And branding is who we are, what we're about, and how that works to our advantage. So when I think about TTSD and the reputation that was already out there before I even came on board, was that this was the district to be at. There were trailblazers, you lead the way in a lot of the work, and that was an attraction for folks that wanted to be here. And I have to be honest, like people are going, oh, you're going to that district, all right? And so there was there is a perception out there in terms of TTSD and the work that has been done with RTI, all right? Equity, Dr. Sue has shared, new staff that have come on board this last year have seen videos, have seen evidence of the work that we're doing and said, hey, I want to be a part of TTSD. And they had shared that at the new teacher orientation. And just like I said, just leading the work, things that we have to work on in terms of branding is updating our website in terms of job description. We talked about doing videos in which promote our workforce and what folks are doing out there. And we're talking both classified and licensed, but that's so important for us to be able to do in order to put our voice out there in terms of branding. But we also have a real perception that we see as one of the barriers in all of this is that we are so close to PPS. We're so close to other districts where the student body diversification is much more than ours. And that's an attraction to staff of color. They want to be in communities in which they feel like they're serving their own. And so that is part of the challenge that we have. And then there's also our BIPOC staff experience that we need to work on. And it's not just us, because it is in other districts, in other spaces, but there is a perception of, hey, this is a predominantly white district, and we have some folks that have had some challenges and have faced challenges and have left of those because of those challenges. And so that's that part I'm working on, our culture and community that is humanizing, and looking at that staff pillar and how is it that we are reflecting on those pieces that are helping our staff, especially our staff of color, feel like they want to stay. All right, so that's that piece around branding, getting the word out, who we are, job fairs, all of that good stuff. Next slide. And so current efforts, job fair, this last year was a real benefit despite the pandemic because we were virtual. And so we were able to get folks nationwide that were interested in coming and learning about districts in the state of Oregon and learning about TTSD. And we were able to take advantage of interviewing folks and hiring folks from diverse backgrounds. Through that, we also have some current partnerships with universities such as PSU in terms of diversifying our workforce, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. And then one of the things that we are really proud of is our work in terms of our grow our own pipeline, because we have to recognize that we have to work with the pool in which we have, and we are going to be building students and staff that are in TTSD that already know our culture and what we're about, and really want to come back as educators in our district and be a part of the work that we're doing. And so we'll talk about that here shortly. Next slide. All right, so Diverse Educator Pathway Program. One more slide. So like I said, when I came on, there was a partnership already in place with Northwest Regional Education, our ESD, with the Grow Their Own program. So we partnered with them. We work with them collaboratively on a grant that helps us provide the structure for our Grow Our Own program. What I ended up doing to come to the design in which we have today is that I was able to interview current staff that are teachers that did the transition from being classified staff into becoming teachers and saying, hey, so tell me about your process. What did that take? What did that feel like? What would you wish was in place to help support you? What could us as a district could have done better? What worked? What didn't work? And then also taking current classified staff that were interested and say, hey, what is it that you would like to see? And from that came the design in which we have today. So the program that we have today came from doing these empathy interviews with current staff and potential future educators in our district. The other piece that we have is also partnership with Portland State University. So the BTP program, bilingual teacher program, we have in a couple weeks a opportunity in which we are going to be promoting that program, and there's going to be an opportunity that we're sharing out with staff to come and learn more if they want to be a bilingual educator. Also, we have a couple of staff members that are part of the DICE Plus program, which is a diverse and inclusive program for those that are becoming special education teachers. So those that are bicultural and bilingual, and we have a couple of individuals that are part of that program currently. All right, next slide. And Debbie, feel free to jump in. All right, so part of the development of this program was like, hey, we really need someone to help us navigate these systems. Someone that we can go to and say, hey, I'm stuck. I'm not sure. How do I do this? How do I fill out this form? Where do I go for this? And so as a result, we hired what is called a navigator. Her name is Alondra Panisaltu, and she has a background in school counseling, and she delivers all kinds of supports to our staff. And so if we can go to the next video, and the next slide, actually the support. So you can see she helps with their planning, career goals, program options. And again, a lot of this training comes from our partnership with Northwest Regional and the Diverse Educator program for them. She helps with them applying. And that's any staff, not just our staff of color, because anybody is interested in becoming an educator, we're going to support that. All right, so I just want to make sure that we're clear on that piece. Also, any training, one of the things that we do with those that are in the last couple of years, we provide professional development opportunities to learn about our district practices. And so training up those folks so that when they do go out there and they interview, they know their stuff and they've had opportunities to observe, be in classrooms, those types of pieces. And then also following up with success and retainment. So getting folks connected in affinity spaces and teacher support, which are actually done by our connectors, which we'll see them later. Next slide. All right, so again, just another way of framing the work that she has done and that she has put this together just to share with you. So one-on-one meetings, you see she meets them where they're at. So we have this individual in their car. Hey, we're gonna meet and help you wherever you may be. This is the flyer for our BTP Pathway program that is going to be coming up here soon. Our colleagues of color affinity space, again, an opportunity for people to connect with others and network. And then our monthly newsletter that she creates and sends out to those that are a part of this program. All right, next. And so I'm going to have Patty play this video just to learn about the program, its participants, so that you can see that.
Diverse Educator Pathway Program is to put highly qualified and trained licensed educators in front of our diverse student population that looks like them. We know that representation matters. Research has shown over and over again that when students who are historically underrepresented are taught by a teacher who looks like them and represents their lived experience, they perform better in school. If we want to narrow the achievement gap, we must increase the number of licensed staff of color in our school district. The ideal candidate for the Diverse Educator Pathway Program is a classified staff member at TTSD or a high school senior at TTSD who are interested in returning to the school district to be an educator. They are in the last 2 years of a graduate or graduate teaching program, or in the case of the graduating senior, will be entering a teaching program. They want the support that the program offers, including financial assistance, support with navigating the licensure process, and professional development and networking opportunities.
I'm Carol Tan. I'm in Diverse Educator Program because I want to become educator. And I'm always resonated with students with special needs, and I would like to bring positive impact to their life and make them feel they're part of community and they are cared by all of us. And this program provides me the opportunity to meet with other peers who has the same goal to be the future educators.
My name's Abraham Diaz, and the reason why I decided to join the DEP program is because I really enjoyed working with students and staff, and I really want to show students that someone like them could become an educator too.
My name is Jennifer Arroyo, and I've decided to join the Diversity Educators Pathway program because I feel like it's a great networking and a lot of support from the school district that I hope to work in one day. I've decided to become a TTSD educator because I have done my schooling throughout TTSD, and it's been such a great experience. The teachers have been a great help for me, and they've made a big impact in my life, so I hope to also be a part of this wonderful community for my future students.
Interested candidates can check out our website, reach out to me, or reach out to one of the many connectors throughout our school district.
Thank you, Patty. So if we can go to the next slide. So currently, we have four, I'm hoping we can hear me. We have four staff members, four classified staff members, those four that you have seen, that are part of this program, individuals that are looking to be counselor, special education teacher, mathematics, bilingual teachers. So all of those are areas in which we will have need for in the next couple of years, no doubt. We do give them a $5,000 scholarship, and they make a commitment to us for 3 years, which is what we want to do. We want to make sure they get tenured. And so that is the commitment that we ask of them. And all of these folks have said, yes, you know, we're committed to being here. Next one. And then we have the student pathway. We currently have 5 students at Western who are also either bilingual pathway, higher math, and these are all students of color that have come out of Tualatin and Tigard High School that are saying, hey, we want to come back and, you know, give back to our community, give back to our district. And so we're excited for them. So those 5 will be graduating in the next couple of years. They're transferring from PCC over, they're already there. We are sending them a care package this holiday season just to tell them, hey, we're thinking about you, keep up the good work. And they commit to 180 to 200 hours in the summer for interning. So they were there during the summer school programming and providing support, and they get a $3,000 stipend, and again, the same level of commitment. Okay, next slide. And then currently we have over 25 BIPOC staff that are still in that PCC lower phase that we're supporting to go through this pipeline. So again, just growing and supporting our staff, and that is where we're sourcing our staff of color. Next. Just another way to look at it, and since I can't see it from this distance and my screen is frozen, we're just going to keep going. There's just another way of seeing everything. And then finally, you know, we have our connectors that you see referenced, and these are our educators that we have that either connect with students to recruit them into this pipeline, or they are staff go-tos. And you see these folks a lot in the district. They're highly involved. They're involved with students. They're connecting with staff, and they are really bringing these folks in and encouraging them and supporting them and supporting our efforts to diversify our workforce. And finally, thank you, Patty. Again, our final focus, you know, in terms of retention is creating a culture and climate that is humanizing. And so, yes, it's great that we have colleagues of color. It's great that we have all these partnerships within our community. We have new teacher mentorship, but there are aspects that we have an opportunity for growth in. And that comes in an employee engagement survey. We need to be able to gauge job satisfaction, teacher morale, and retention under those factors that we know that are important, such as voice, work-life balance. All of those are key components. And we don't really have a tool yet that in order to do that. And that is something that we need to be able to do if we're really talking about retention and KPIs, key performance indicators. And that part about morale, satisfaction is important in that. And then also implicit bias and interrupting implicit bias training. That is something that I'm looking to make it a part of a new teacher, just like our new folks orientation, making that a part of just knowing and being aware and giving that initial dosing during that time, because we know that bias leads to microaggression leads to discrimination, and so on and so forth. So we do need to be able to interrupt those things, and that's important for us to do. And then also the final piece is around teacher of color placement. I know we're going to have in the next couple of years all of these folks to place, but we don't want them to be in places in isolation. So we will have to work with our leadership to know that, hey, we may have to put folks together. And I know that we may be taking from you this opportunity to select, but we know that it's important that folks aren't in isolation in spaces, because that also leads to them wanting to leave. All right. And I believe that is everything. And there's a quote that, again, I can't read from this distance, and it's amazing. And you should read that. Oh, go ahead and read it.
Intent alone is no longer good enough. Until diversity, equity, and inclusion evolves from a DEI statement to tangible KPIs, intent will not translate into progress. Can't read the author.
And that concludes. So we're available for any questions.
All right, well, first, thank you both for the presentation. I know that was a board request, and we appreciate you being here to provide that information. Colleagues, do you have any questions or comments? Vice Chair Lynn.
I'll say thank you very much for that in-depth report. It's really good to know, that we're kind of looking at the data in terms of looking at how we are working toward decreasing that gap that you talked about between staff of color and students of color. I think that is important, and I appreciate the emphasis on the research there that shows that teachers of color, in fact, make a difference, particularly in the lives of students of color, but in the lives of all students, right? So, and I also want to express gratitude too for all the connections that you're making to the wide variety of programs that are out there to recruit teachers of color in the teacher education programs, an area where I work. So I think that's important as well, to sort of keep your eye on that ball and to be facilitating those relationships. So I don't really have a question. My point was just to say thanks.
And to piggyback onto to that, I am so excited to see our Grow Your Own program really starting to take off. And we started talking about this, I think it was 4 years ago, something like that. We started thinking about how are we going to do it, and to see that we've now got students in the program and students of color in the program. Because one of the things that's so exciting about that is that the one problem we have when we bring people in from outside of our area is that BIPOC teacher going to be successful? Whereas when it's one of our students, we already know they know the culture. We already know that they're pretty comfortable here. And so the chances of that retention are that much higher. And so that's so exciting. So I'm really glad to see that that's working. So thank you for all of your hard work on this over the years, because it's been sizable.
Director Irvin.
I really will just briefly echo what my colleagues have said. What really stood out to me is this investment in folks and investment in our students ultimately, and these incredible educators that will get to teach these students, and really putting time and not even so much financial investment, although that's really incredible as well, but really time and focus and care into this program, investing that. And we know a lot of, they've come to these meetings, some of those connectors, we know them, and they're incredibly involved and we know the changes that they are making in student outcomes and student lives every day. We watch that happen at board meetings. So it's really exciting to kind of look at that roadmap and see where we're headed and see who's already on that road to really making big changes. So it's really great to see just that nurturing investment, I think, in both future educators and our students that will benefit from it.
Director Highways, I realize I'm looking over here before I look over here too. So if you ever have anything, let me know.
I do. So thank you very much for the report. Wanted to ask, the 16% educators of color, is that teaching staff or is that staff overall?
Licensed.
Licensed staff, okay. And then, so we talked about the why in the video. Could you rehash that a little bit more as to the why? Because as we've seen, we got some community members that believe that diversification is important at the teaching staff. So I'm wondering if you can readdress that.
Sure. We have research that says that all students benefit when they have a teacher of color. And that is one. Two, we have the Educator Equity Act that is a mandate that is put upon us to make sure that we are diversifying our workforce and that we have that parity between students and staff. And so there's that aspect. You mentioned HB 201, which again supports that in terms of retention of staff of color based on merit. And again, that goes back to that parity piece. It's important to keep that individual because of parity, which is something that we'll have to discuss when it comes to negotiation time. But that's the key piece, is that everyone benefits by having these individuals. And as another piece we say about everyone benefits. Currently, because we have this program, and of course our focus is on diversifying, but it does not mean that we say no to any staff member that's interested, because diversity is not just about the race. We have this focus because we have a mandate. However, we do want representation from LGBTQ. We want to make sure that we're bringing that piece in there. If somebody has a disability, teachers, we have to make sure that we're inclusive of everybody that diversity encompasses. And so this allows for anyone to be able to come to Alondra or any of the connectors and say, hey, I'm interested, and we will provide them support in navigating systems. So that's where everybody gets the benefit because of the work that we're trying to do to diversify.
And what do you say to the educators at TTSD that are listening in today that are hearing from community members that believe that diversity doesn't matter?
That's a really good question in terms of how do I answer that without it being personal. And me, as where I sit, is not without the push of people in my life that we're educators of color, and it's not without me saying, hey, I see an opportunity where I can help, where I didn't get that opportunity of having educators of color. So I'm here because of a lack and not being able to say somebody looks like me, right? That is sitting in that classroom. And it was because as a one teacher who I did have, that I was an aide in her class, and she was a Black teacher. And as I shared the story often, it made me say, I want to be her. And so I stand here because of that makes a difference. And I know that educators of color are making the difference for students that look like them, but also for other students. So yeah, it makes a difference. I'm here because of that.
Yeah, thank you so much, because as most of you know, I've shared this before. I'm also here because of an educator that just happened to be Latina. She was our ELD, or as we used to call it, ESL teacher, and she came around to my home, came around to my parents' home, and obviously my home, well, my parents' home was my home, but she befriended my mom, and she was there for us, and I was able to look at her and see myself as an educator, as a future educator, and once I joined TTSD, being a classified employee and going through the bilingual teachers pathways program was of great benefit for me. I don't think I would have been able to become an educator had it not been for that program, because as working with the district, right, I was able to keep my position, I was able to keep my benefits, I was able to go to school and work at the same time. And so, all of those things, for me to be able to influence the lives of others, and now being here and having that representation. So I appreciate you coming in here and giving us this presentation. Thank you.
I'm gonna make quick comments and then I'll go for a second round if folks have additional questions. Thank you, Director Jimenez, for those questions. I was actually going to go there in my remarks as well. And I think you all touched on this, but the research is abundantly clear that diverse teachers benefit students who are of color and who are of white. That is indisputable. And as you mentioned, there's state requirements that we do this. But on top of that, what I've been thinking about is the marketplace that we're operating in terms of other districts. This is an emphasis across the country, but particularly across Oregon because of the reasons that we've mentioned. And so I'm curious, when I look at these numbers, do you see opportunity for growth in the coming years in terms of additional college scholarships, additional growth in our Grow Your Own programs? What do you think the next 3 to 5 years look like in terms of our efforts for workforce diversification?
So we have to think about attrition, who's coming out before we can say who can come in. And so that's gonna play a key role, right? All right, so are we seeing a growth and students coming in, and therefore we need to add more staff? Do we have a lot of folks retiring? So those are pieces that we need to take into consideration before we can say, hey, we're gonna be able to grow it. Like right now, I know, and here's why we have the numbers we do, because we have a certain amount of attrition that we expect that happens. And we know there's always a need for math, there's always a need for science. So we are really trying to find folks that are for those hard to fill positions. And although I may want to take 5 potential counselors, I know I'm not gonna be able to put in place 5 potential counselors of color, and we have to consider that attrition piece. And so it's taking a look at that forecasting and seeing, hey, are we seeing growth in our student numbers, and we know we're gonna have opportunities. So those are things to consider. So I wish I could give a really definitive answer on that.
And I would just say that we also look at not only the shortage across the nation and in our state around the educator workforce, but we also need to look at our data and which teachers are in the 25 to 30-year mark. And TTSD has had an excellent reputation of retaining teachers for their entire careers. I mean, we have many teachers that have been here 30 plus years, and we have many that are in the last half of their career. We have more, we are top heavy on that end. And so that's another piece of data that we need to look at when we're talking about these kind of programs. So my hope is that we would continue to invest because the context that I've worked from as a principal of a bilingual school and now your HR director is that heading out to California and New Mexico and trying to recruit people to come up to Oregon, we tried that. And I'm not saying that still shouldn't happen, but we need to look inward right here. The people in our community, our kids, our parents, and our staff, and support them because they are right here with us. They know our community, they love our kids, and that is where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck around diversifying our workforce. That's my belief, that's Lynn's belief, that's why we've really worked hard to make sure that we are putting most of our eggs in our grow our own basket with our students and our staff and even our parent workforce too. We've recruited parent volunteers who are interested, and we continue to bring them in to start as IAs
learning special assistants and find that they have an incredible talent with students. And, you know, that's what we want to be able to have the capacity to grab those folks and bring them in and help them grow into teachers within our system. So
that's really helpful. My quick follow-up is, would you say that, so theoretically speaking, if we had more resources to invest in a grow your own program, is the bigger obstacle we need to get more resources to invest there, or is the bigger obstacle we can't find enough people to fill the slots in those programs, or is it a mix of both?
Yes, it's a mix of both, and then there's the resource piece. Of course, we have like the folks that are the poor, they're within 2 years, so they're within like striking distance of finishing up and need the additional, you know, the funding, whether it's schooling or whether they make it so that when they have to do their student teaching, it's not such a big hit for them. And we cover insurance, we're going to continue that. And so, yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a mix of both as you think about it. And again, it's always going to be based on our, if we invest all this money, can we put some in our district? Right. That's going to be it.
Okay. And Vice Chair Lynn, do you have some questions?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier the challenges around retention, and we talked mostly about recruitment. We haven't talked really about retention yet. And you know, and part of what I do is look at the literature on this, and there's a lot of discussion about climate and how climate impacts teachers of color, interest and ability to even stay in the profession, right? Let alone stay in a particular school district. So what are you seeing in terms of kind of reasons for lower retention rates? If that's the case, I assume that there are some challenges there. And so maybe you can just talk about kind of what's happening with teachers of color in terms of retention, and how you see that happening. And then I'm also interested, or why you see that happening. I'm also interested in sort of what the board might be able to do to support, you know, better retention, if in fact that's an issue.
So one of the challenges can be applied to any educator, but yet as an individual of color, there are some that are just a little bit more prominent. So of course that work-life balance of a general teacher and one that is a bilingual teacher is going to be different. I mean, I'm hearing of them having to take a lot of time to like translate things, and you know, there's a lot of additional hours and things that they're doing, and so that is a factor, right? There's also the factor around experiences with colleagues, and whether they feel when they are feeling microaggressions, that they feel that can be addressed appropriately. And there's only so much in which an individual can take before they say, hey, you know, I have to take care of myself and I'm late, right? So those are things that are considerations that are outside, that not everyone has that experience. And so what we need to be able to do is to measure that experience for all of our staff and be able to get that and disaggregate that data. And one of the things that we are looking at is a program called Upbeat. We no longer have the TEL is gone. So we do need to find a way to really measure the impact of, you know, professional development and support systems and mentorship. And it's just like a catch-all that we can do. And they're able to even provide support to principals around goals using this data for us. And so we need to be able to measure that. And with that is always a cost. And so we're taking a look at, you know, some tools to be able to measure and use that as a KPI year after year with our staff overall. But we do need a tool to be able to do that.
And another quick point to make is, as I mentioned, that a lot of our workforce is at the latter part of their career, that's going to flip in the next 5 to 10 years. And so we need to be ready for that. We also need to be ready for the generational differences that each generation brings to the job. And so collecting data around that has been a really important part of our work, and a very fascinating part actually too, to just, the difference between our baby boomers going out of the profession and our millennials and our Gen Zs coming into the profession. The needs are different, and we need to be able, like Lynn was saying, to measure that. We need to be able to measure what those needs are, and then how as a school district we meet those needs, and we need a consistent way to do that. And so that is why we are looking at outsourcing that, so that we can be consistent and have that qualitative and quantitative data that's consistent year to year.
Well, just to follow up, I'll just say I look forward to having a conversation about what that tool might look like and how we might support your efforts to make that happen.
All right. Well, with that, thank you again. I hope you heard support from this board for the work that you're doing. This is really important, and we appreciate you giving us this information tonight. All right, and with that, we'll move on to a little bit of a different report and discussion. This will be a dangerous one because it will be from the board directors. So a little bit of a back context for folks who are watching this meeting. Our work session today was about our SIP plans from 5 select schools, and each individual board member met with the principal and cabinet member and spoke in depth for 40-50 minutes on that specific school plan. Thank you to Director Robson and his team for organizing that for us. Before we dive in, and each board member will offer, we've got 3 minutes each to offer sort of, I know we spoke for a long time, but to offer maybe 2 or 3 highlights for you, things that you think would be relevant and important for your colleagues to know. And I will just quickly say, and I think Director Zerschmidt agrees with this in the brief conversation we had, we used to have a system where each school would have like 10 minutes to present their SIP plan to the board. And so it was very narrow and very rapid. And I actually strongly prefer this method where we're able to go deeper and really ask deep questions, get to know the data more intimately. So I just wanted to say thank you, Director Robson, for organizing it this way, and for your team for putting it together. So with that, we're going to move into 3 minutes per person. I'm not going to time, but I do ask, maybe Jill is ready to time. But I would like to keep us relatively on track for time. So we'll try to keep it to 3 minutes per person. And with that, is there anyone who's ready to lead us off and go first?
I'll give it a whirl.
Okay, thank you. Director Zerschmidt, go for it.
So I had the privilege of meeting with Tualatin Middle School and some amazing work going on there. And I have to say, I love this way of doing the SIPs so much better than the old way. So thank you. I kind of feel like there was a fire hose of information coming at me from Principal Curl, but I think I got a lot more information from him, and so many useful things. But what I really was impressed by being able to go into this amount of detail was hearing him talking about the staff development that they're doing. So they've got the peer-to-peer learning walks where teachers are going around and going into each other's classrooms and seeing other teachers in action, and then they're able to steal great ideas for teaching and apply it in their own classroom. It's wonderful stuff. The other thing is the training that staff are getting in interrupting implicit bias, stuff that Len Reed was just talking about. And in the Tualatin CIP, there is a link to their slideshow of what they use to teach teachers how to interrupt implicit bias. And it's wonderful stuff because it gives the teacher an opportunity to say, I don't know what to do in this situation, and then get some ideas. And it's a very natural and real and human way of dealing with situations that arrive in schools, and giving teachers the tools to then pass that teaching on to students. So 2 really great things that I saw coming out of it.
That was excellent modeling.
2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Who'd like to go next? Director Jaimes.
All right, so I have the pleasure of meeting with Jessica, the principal over at Metzger Elementary, and Jessica Swindle, sorry, and Carol Kinch, and she was the liaison for the cabinet. And the things that I connected with was the fact that they've got a very narrow focus on how to decrease the opportunity gaps, right, through literacy, language, and love. And the love part was the one that kind of caught me off guard, but it was very interesting because they're building that collective efficacy, and also they're looking at literacy with like as a civil right, including culturally responsive instruction into everything that they're doing, and basically including just equity as everything is integrated, right? They're not looking at literacy, they're not looking at ELD, they're not looking at all of that, but they're looking at everything together. And so that that collective efficacy that comes from having everything together is one of the things that that they're doing great over there, and having those congruent instructional practices that is going to move the dial, right? They've also been, as you know, we're doing RTI and responsive intervention at Tigard-Tualatin leaders in that, I think. And so, you know, with that comes meetings that are called 100% meetings and 20% meetings. And with that, they're doing their 20% meetings different in the sense that they're looking at the data, but they're also asking their teachers, what else or what do you feel like you're missing anything? Do you feel like you need something else from us? And they're giving them that efficacy to be able to advocate for what they need. Another very important instructional practice that they're doing is co-teaching. And I know that TTSD is moving towards co-teaching at a district level. However, they've been the pioneers in doing it for their school for a while now and have the instructional practice down. And, you know, it's like, we're no longer asking if we're doing co-teaching. Everybody that is hired at Metzger knows that that's what they're doing. So one of the clarifying questions that I had was, well, is that for, what is co-teaching? Who does that? And it's through the English language development team, where they're coming in and doing a set of lessons for an instructional, whether it be math or literacy or things like that, or science. And they're helping the main classroom teacher co-plan lessons together. And then the other thing that I was curious is with their love aspect, where they're integrating social justice, social emotional learning, those things, is that integration just at Metzger, or is that happening district-wide? And so, so we talked a little bit about that, and shout out to Bridgeport and to Metzger, because they're the only ones with their SIP plans in at least their mission statements in English and Spanish. And the rest do not have that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Vice Chair Lynn.
I meant to ask.
I could read the body language.
Yeah, I had a really great conversation with the principal at Tigard and Director Dobson. Is that right? Robson. Yeah, we do that. I don't know why we do that. Sorry, Robson. And we talked about what I think is a really integrated and comprehensive approach to really focusing on meeting students' needs, right? That views students as really partners in the learning and teaching process, which is really nice. And he talked about a whole set of processes that they had engaged in over the past couple of years to really help the staff understand what students need in order to be successful. And so there are a whole set of strategies that they have adopted that, you know, if I were to sort of sum it all up, it's really about collaboration, getting teachers to work together in teams across disciplinary areas, but also sort of in groups like the ninth grade teachers are working together pretty consistently to think about how they can share resources, but how they can develop, as you were talking about, those congruent practices and strategies. There's a whole effort around grading and how we can be thoughtful about how we assess what students know. And there are all these really great conversations going on. There's an emphasis also on social emotional learning, as well as DEI. And then again, in the collaboration, I think is a big focus. I think through our conversation, I think what we sort of came to understand was that there, I think, also is the opportunity to think about instruction, particularly as the sort of DEI focus comes into fruition, to think about how that shapes what teachers do in the classroom in terms of instruction, in particular subject areas. And so I think we were all excited about sort of what that might look like in the future.
Okay. All right, Director Urban.
All right. Well, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Principal Rory Moore from Alberta Ryder and Director Un, and there's actually a lot of things that are similar, so I'll sort of pull out some of the ones that are dissimilar. So one of the things that I really love is he talked about sort of how we often we're siloed in our committees within a school, and so we have our DEI and we have our RTI and we have our all of these things, and it's great, but and they all kind of work, but they don't really work together, and it's hard to kind of share efficiently and effectively all the different work that's being done. So they've sort of de-siloed those committees and created an instructional leadership team model. So you have one big conversation with several people, including the dean, coach, the ELL representative, SPED representative, the family partnership advocate, teachers, the TTA rep. So this huge kind of group of people that are having one big conversation around all of those different aspects that we would typically have little tiny groups about. And I think what that does, it really builds that foundation, so that one thing we were talking about in the group was those small groups can be nice and that's helpful, but those have a lot of turnover year after year, and a lot of that work ends up getting lost. And so really by having this larger teamwork approach, you build a much more solid foundation that's broader, and so that really can be built on year after year. So that was one thing that really struck me and inspired me. They also are having dedicated staff meetings to just climate and culture. And so they also have the instructional meetings, they also have the 20% meetings, so they're doing 100% meetings a year as well, but they really have these ones that are focused on climate and culture. And he kind of wrote to build collective efficacy through reflective connection and professional development designed by the school's leadership team, which was that group that I just mentioned. And so really having that focus, just that time, just to talk about how things are going on that climate and culture level was interesting to me, and I really liked that. And then I think the other big thing is looking at how they are calibrating, and Director Un and I were kind of asking questions about this, but really seeing, all of the things that we want to infuse equity through is really also calibrating all of the work we're doing to see those increases in reading and math, especially in our underserved populations. And so by working with EASH and having those equity meetings and seeing those surveys, and they're reading the You Matter book across the entire school as sort of the school theme, all of those things that seem maybe just in this equity bucket really are infusing that sense of equity throughout academics, so that you show that interconnectedness between equity, academics, and then you see those academic outcomes change. And that was a neat thing to kind of see Alberta Writers sort of thinking, kind of changing, going through that. Like, they're not really these two separate things. They really mesh together to grow those equitable academic outcomes. So.
Very nice.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna put my timer on, so got something to ground me. So I met with Principal Jordan Mills and Dr. Lisa McCall, and a couple of high-level thoughts and observations. One is we made the right investment on iReady. I really felt like the SIP was an opportunity to use that data and dive in and understand it. And I hope you all got that opportunity too. Jordan spent some time walking me through the table where basically, I just love that we know on the student level, this is the student, this is where they're at, this is how much growth they're gonna need this year in order to get to grade level. And I think it just provides so much useful information to an educator in a classroom. The not negative thing, but the reality that we also talked about is the pandemic and where students are at coming back and how that is impacting instruction and non-instructional challenges that students have. And we talked about students coming back lacking some social skills that they had to spend some time getting caught up to speed. Another thing I really appreciate, I don't know if I know this exists at other schools, but Bridgeport's instructional look-fors is a document that basically it takes specific actions or instructional practices and it connects the standards by which a teacher is going to be evaluated, Hattie's research about its effectiveness, what it actually looks like in the school, and then culturally responsive actions tied to that specific piece. And it just struck me as very practical and something that folks could actually use in their instruction. A couple of other things worth noting that I thought was very cool. One is just a small languaging thing. At Bridgeport, they have what they call their all-star teams, referring to students, all-star teams. And when I heard it, I assumed this was like the high achieving students. In fact, all-star teams at Bridgeport, when teachers use the phrase all-star teams, they're students who might need a little extra support, a little more attention. But the language they use is framed really positively and it's aligned with growth mindset. And I think that kind of languaging actually helps reinforce what we're trying to teach our students. I really like that. And then we talked about instructional practices that are being deployed across grade levels and a lot of small groups to help support teachers with grade and level and to make sure that students are getting the individual attention they need to get up to grade level or to advance beyond grade level. And then finally, we talked a little bit about parents and the role of parents. What information do parents get? How do parents support their students outside of the classroom? And overall is, again, fascinating and very valuable for me and support members. So I'm looking forward to our next two sessions where we'll dive into the rest of the schools in the district. So with that, are there any questions from board members or comments on the first round of our first of three SIP presentations? Yeah, Vice Chair Lynn.
I feel like I've been talking a lot, so I apologize. But at the end of our conversation, we started talking about what it would look like to really emphasize academic achievement for historically marginalized students, and we started talking about strategies for getting more of those students into gifted and talented programs, and really, so equity then is about getting students really challenging academic opportunities, right? And making sure that all students have those opportunities. So I really appreciated that conversation. And it just reminded me, I think, of the work we're going to be engaging in around strategic planning and thinking about, equity as sort of academically enriching curriculum and teaching for all students. So I appreciated that focus and that sort of movement in the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, having now heard from my fellow board members what you all talked about, I have even now more appreciation for this new way of doing SIPs because I'm able to see, yes, at Bridgeport, it's similar here, it's a little different this way, and yet the overarching, the way the schools are doing their SIPs are consistent across the district because there were so many connectors where it's like, yeah, we talked about that too, but awesome. I'm really liking it. I'm really liking this new process, so.
A successful experiment. Very nice.
We might be sick of it by the end of the year, though.
Director Jaime.
Just want to say, so now that we've got these SIPs here, then our work with Vice Chair Lynn and myself and the EASH committee is going to happen sometime in December, where we're going to meet and we're going to go over each you know what I'm saying. plan and looking it over and seeing what questions we have for the building principals. So that's coming up next. We should be able to report on that, hopefully, if not the board meeting in December, if, the one in January, probably in January.
Great. All right. Thank you both for leading that work. And with that, we're going to move on to, I gave us a teaser earlier. This is the first reading of board policies for board policy updates. Director Debbie Ebert.
All right, well, good evening again. Dr. Bowman, did you want to say anything about committee work, or have you already talked about that with the board?
Yeah, I'm happy to make some quick remarks first before we move in.
Sure, okay.
And thank you, Director Ebert. So just some context for new board members, because it just so happens that the two returning board members are on the committee. So we've done policy updates a couple ways since I've been on the board. What we did, this version is option A, and essentially option A is we have two board members, just like any other committee, that dives deeply into the policy choices put forward by the Oregon School Boards Association. This is for recommended policies, where we basically get to choose a couple of language options, what we want, the general direction of the policy, and then we bring those recommendations back to the board. The board always has the opportunity to ask questions or dive more deeper on a specific policy or recommend their own specific changes. As a board member, you have all of those abilities. But what we also found was that in past board meetings, each policy met such a high level of dialogue and questions and recommended changes that we were essentially at a policy committee meeting to do the policy work. Then we'd come to the board meeting, and the board meeting would do the same work all over again. So what we've done this time is we've gone back to the policy committee format. And so I guess what we'll see tonight, and it's really up to us, is does this format work? And if what we're finding is on every policy, folks have questions or concerns or want to change the direction, then we may just abandon the policy committee. And basically what it would require is more work sessions. We'd set like an hour for work sessions before a board meeting so we could dive in more deeply. But assuming there's general alignment, which, knock on wood, for these policies, there's not a ton of tremendous controversy, then we'll continue this model where we can efficiently kind of move through the policies. But there are, I think, 2 or 3 dozen policies that we'll need to work through. So just know that for context of time. Not all tonight, they'll be split up over a period of meetings. But yeah, we do have a chunk of policy coming forward. So that's just my precursor, just so folks are aware of the context and options we have as a board. And with that, I'll hand anything you wanted to add, Director Ebert.
Yeah, just a couple things to add. Thank you, Director Bowman. So as you know, we went through a long process of revamping all of our policies. It took us, I believe it was 2 full years to go through every policy. And now quarterly, we will get updates from OSBA. This last one in October was pretty lengthy because they skipped one, and they often coincide with the legislature meeting and doing their work, of course. And so this October, we received a hefty amount of policy updates based on legislative work. And so you'll see the first grouping that we've put in front of you tonight have very few additions. And it's mostly just legalese that we need to add into our policy. Good changes that are coming down from the legislators' work. And that are not changing a lot of the content or meaning of the policies. However, I will be presenting again in December and then in January as well to get through all of the policies that have updates, and some will require more conversation than others. But we'll always try to, in the explanation section, give you those kind of added pieces so that you have a heads up ahead of time what the discussion could be around. We really don't have to have a lot of discussion around things that the law says we have to put into policy versus other policies that are our own policy or are highly recommended by OSBA could require more conversation. So that's it.
One thing I mentioned that I would say tonight that I forgot is the expectation, as with everything in the board packet, is that you've reviewed the policies prior to the meeting. So we won't spend time in the meeting walking through, oh, here's this change, here's this change. if you have a specific concern or question, elevate that at any time during the board meeting. That's more than welcome, but we won't go through every specific change in the board. Yeah, Director.
Will it be noted on here which ones are required versus recommended changes from when we're looking at this sheet in our board packet?
Good question.
Yeah, good question. Yes, we usually have that in here and I realize we did it. So we're out of practice. I apologize. But yes, we will always have those in there. I think everything tonight is required.
And so just so you know, when you look at the individual policies down in the lower left-hand, right, yeah, left-hand corner, there's going to be an R or an HR that's recommend or required or highly recommended. And if it doesn't have one of those, it means it's optional and we can.
I just meant on, yeah.
Yeah, but it's not on the cover sheet. Yeah. So.
And we'll start making sure that that's in the explanation piece as well. All right, well then, without further ado, I think we'll dive in. All right, so our first policy this evening is AC, non-discrimination. And the only change to this policy is we're adding the additional piece of gender identity, which has been added to the list that's become state law. Okay, any questions there? In addition, there's a new footnote that you'll see at the bottom around the Native American mascot pursuant to OAR 581-021-0047.
Okay.
And gender identity has been added throughout, so that's going to keep popping up for us, and that's House Bill 35, excuse me. Okay. And then that also includes the AR that goes with AC, which is a required AR. Complaint form added gender identity as well. All right, then we move on to BBAA, individual board members' authority and responsibilities. We have some language that's been crossed off. You see in the 4th paragraph, new language: when expressing personal opinions in a public forum, the board member must clearly identify the opinions as their own and not those of the board. Down in number 3, additional language and strikeouts there. Those are the only changes. Questions there? Dr. Lane?
Yeah, I think I probably raised a question about this early on, just because of the work I do with a lot of sharing of opinions. And I often don't even mention the school district or the school board, because I don't want to bring, negative attention to Tigard-Tualatin. So just to clarify once again, I'm not expected to sort of make a statement like that every time I, do a presentation, obviously.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
But I mean, I don't think that anything that we're currently doing is outside the scope of the policy that's been written.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe others have thoughts on that.
I would only say if your introduction includes Marvin Lynn is the vice chair of the Tigard-Tualatin School Board, then to just emphasize that. But you're doing so many presentations based on your professional job that I wouldn't say every time.
I think a good rule of thumb is if there's any chance that somebody in the audience might confuse your personal opinion with your board work, just to make that clarifying statement. But yeah.
All right, moving on to BD/BDA. And this one is around board meetings. The grade language is added, has been added. You'll notice gender identity has been added there. Some additional time has been added. On the second page, there's a few additional adds, just new words. That's it. Questions here? Okay. Need another hand. All right, next one is CM, compliance and reporting on standards. You see there's a few changes here due to the State Board of Education revising the report due date from February 1st to November 1st for each school year.
And so this relates to the Division 22.
Division 22, yes.
report that we heard in November.
Which I believe we did at the last board meeting.
Yep.
All right. Moving on, GBA, equal employment opportunity, just adds the gender identity piece from House Bill 2935. And also note the new footnote at the bottom for equal employment opportunity. Any questions there?
Nope.
Okay. All right, GBEA, workplace harassment. Same, just adds gender identity and the additional footnote. All right, IB, freedom of expression. As already noted, House Bill 2935 added definition of race discrimination, and House Bill 3041 added a new definition for gender identity to protected classes. So this just updates that.
Director Ebert, did we decide in policy committee to strike the or school policies part at the bottom there? I thought we decided that because schools don't actually have policies, that we would just have district policies there.
Where are you, Director Justin?
At the bottom of the final page of freedom of expression. Sorry, did I get ahead?
Number 6.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we wanted to say the violation of district policies.
I thought that's what we talked about. Is that not what we agreed?
Not ringing a bell with me, but that makes
I
sense.
remember that conversation. I don't recall a thing about this policy, but we don't have school level policy.
Yeah, we don't have school
So,
policies.
Yeah,
Right,
let's strike it.
Okay. All right, and our last policy this evening is KGB, public conduct on district property. And we are adding in the definition that a school or district sponsored event includes any district approved or district related activity or function, such as field trips or athletic events. And we're also adding district property or at an attending school or district sponsored event. So not only events happening within TTSD, but also in other venues that are school sponsored or district sponsored. And then you'll notice the bottom, we also added language. This policy does not apply to events sponsored by parent organizations and or non-district sponsored events. All right. Well, we did it.
A good practice run. A good warm up for things to come.
Yes. All right. Well, you'll see this group of policies on the consent agenda at our December meeting, and then we'll have a new set of first reads. That will be our pattern for the next couple of board meetings.
And if board members are reading in their board packet, a first reading of a policy, and they've got a question or a concern, can they reach out to you directly about that?
Yes, most definitely. Yeah. Or the policy committee. Yeah.
So let's have that be the practice. Reach out to Director Ebert if you have questions or concerns. Okay, thank you,
Okay,
Director
thanks.
Ebert. And with that, we'll move on to our final report and discussion item this evening. It is our SIA annual report with presenter Director David Moore. Director Moore, the floor is yours. Are folks doing good in terms of break, or do we need a recess maybe after this? Okay. No worries, just let us know either way. Yeah.
Good evening, Chairwoman and members of the board.
Yeah, you have to hold it really, that microphone's pushing it.
Good evening, Chairwoman and members of the board. This evening, we're prepared to provide the student investment account annual report for the past year. And I have with me Director Robson to assist with that. Why don't you go to the next slide, please, Guy? So the annual report covers the period July of 2020 through September of 2021. At the end of June, the district still had dollars left to expend, so the state allowed districts to request for an extension. They called it a summer extension. So we had through September to expend those dollars. And that's why we're so late in the year with the annual report. The deadline for the annual report is at the end of this month. So the annual report, of course, requires a report to the board. And for the minutes of this meeting to be provided with the annual report when it's submitted. In addition, the annual report must be posted on the website. And I've been thinking since we sent out the board packet that we probably need to get you the link to the website so you can see not only the report itself, but all of the other reports that have been submitted since the inception of the student investment account. And that posting on the website also needs to mention that public comment is welcome at this meeting related to the annual report. So now I'm going to go through the content of the report. Each quarter since the funds that were received requires a quarterly report. And the first report was the quarter ending December, even though 6 months they were late getting the requirements in place. And then the second report was the quarter ending March. And then due to the extension, there's 6 months in the final third quarter report. The contents include the progress on our strategies and activities. That will be one of the things that will be posted on the website, so you can go back and see what we filed as our strategies and activities in the initial application. And just to summarize some of those strategies, to refresh your memory, I know several, not all of you were on the planning committee when the plan was approved. But the strategies, of course, are some common themes, are instruction in the area of ELL and special education, culturally responsive training, and mental health and wellness, social emotional learning, and a lot of the focus being on those underserved, or as the term Director Bowman shared earlier are all-stars, as Bridgeport refers to them as. And then, of course, collaboration amongst licensed and classified staff in all these areas. And then, of course, the activities are how we executed in the form of investments, those strategies. We'll talk a little bit about the investments later. And then, of course, there's a budget and quarterly finance report that we have to file each quarter, including the third quarter report. And then journaling progress, which kind of gives us a chance to give our feedback on how things are going with and what changes are being made and who's impacting those changes. Examples that we share on a quarterly basis are our basic needs teams, for instance, our trauma and response coordinator as an example. And then next slide, please, Patty. Finally, the last part of the annual report, and Director Robson will go through these and how we responded here, but what are the impacts of the reduced funding and the COVID on the implementation of the SIA. We'll talk about the dollars in a minute, but we were due to receive over $10 million when we filed the application. In 2021, we received just over $3 million. And all districts saw that reduction, of course. And then what are the challenges with the implementation, successes and challenges with maintaining engagement? Community engagement, of course, is a big part and requirement of student investment account. And then what guided our prioritization efforts in the first year? So like I said, Director Robson will address those, how we answered those questions here in a moment. Next slide, please, Patty. So we have, like I said, we had approximately $3.2 million in investments in the 2021 year through the month of September. And so we didn't get to do everything that was in the plan. We prioritized with our community, reprioritized how we would use reduced funding. We had, as a sample, K-3 literacy teachers by the TE, that was the full implementation. As part of that, the progress that we have to report, we either have to say that it was fully implemented, partially implemented, or it has not been implemented yet. And then, of course, we were able to put in place one assistant principal at the elementary level. We've done the rest of those along with the deans in the current year. And then I mentioned the collaboration, the high school mental health and medical social worker, 2 FTE. Next slide, please, Patty. Then to round it out, we had our affinity and alliance extracurricular funds, family partnership advocates in each of our schools, and 2 culturally responsive liaisons, and culturally specific partnerships. I mentioned the special education and the EL FTE, and then we have a little bit for administrative indirect, and then the charter school allocation. So that's a summary of how we invested the funds over the last year. Next slide. I think the last part here is the questions.
Thank you, Director Moore. So in sharing these in the packet, giving all of you an opportunity to kind of take a look at the responses, the 4 questions that were asked as part of the journaling process, again, as Director Moore said, really is an opportunity for us to tell a narrative that's obviously very different than just the numbers across the board. So we appreciate that as a part of the process. So, the impact of reduced dollars, as Director Moore mentioned, quite a bit of reduction. And then on top of that, COVID, and how did that impact implementation? So, you know, the gist of this was in hiring staff, we just weren't able to do the kind of hiring we initially thought we might be able to do. However, as we were able to see benefits of positions that were directly related to, you know, students and families, and really kept an eye on doing that work around understanding needs for our families. And so never leaving that focus behind. Next slide, Patty. And then challenges that come with the implementation based on, again, some reductions and that kind of thing. Again, the same statement holds true in terms of staffing. That was an absolute challenge right out of the gate. And, you know, when you grade the number of different funding sources, that becomes an additional challenge as things ebb and flow and trying to maintain the pathway that you originally had put forward. An additional challenge that's mentioned here on the academic side was that, you know, we had funding, but we didn't have children in school. And due to remote learning options that weren't always applicable based on the need to be face to face. So that was an absolute challenge for us as a part of this. Patty, next slide, please. And then the successes and challenges of maintaining engagement. We, you know, initiating those partnerships as mentioned here with community-based organizations. They were hindered. And that really was due to that same kind of thing with not having kids in school due to the lack of in-person opportunities that were built around building those relationships and those partnerships. You know, with the virtual aspects that existed, we found that we discovered technology finds the barriers and challenges. Those weren't always calibrated, but a lot of them went into right size as we moved through different processes to try to make it successful. But we did have ultimately, in the end, we found that the silver lining was that we had we actually had more time to do collaboration and network that way. So and having teachers connect personally with families that way was actually a silver lining in all that. Next slide, Patty. So what guided prioritization efforts in that first year, and that really was we were situated around the priority of equity, and we really prioritized with our community members in terms of what was the feedback we were getting back from our community members. And we had set that up originally for our SIA processes with how we were doing business and involving our community, bringing our communities to the table. So that priming of those kinds, the way we did business through the processes really allowed us to not only maintain that prioritization, even through the challenges that we saw, but it really allowed us to you know, push the dial in terms of our equity and maintain that. So that was the and what you see from that is that's who we are, TTSD. That's how we do business. We don't stray from that. So it's an exciting part of how we do it. With that, Patty, next slide.
Question? I do have one question. It's sort of broad. As we move forward with the SIA in future years, is the assumption that we're starting with our new allocation for that biennium? Is the assumption that we're starting with all the expenditures that we decided collaboratively in the previous biennium? We're starting from there and then building on top of that, or is there some sort of analysis of, well, this investment wasn't optimal, didn't meet the outcomes we want, so we're going to free up those dollars for new ideas? How are we thinking about the iteration of this process?
Yeah, so the current round of funding isn't quite at the $10 million level. It's like 9.2 million. So we'll have the opportunity to do much of what we had in the initial plan. And then we had an opportunity at the end of June to update our plan. Like if there was something we needed to shift, like we even made a shift through our budget process last year with the $100,000 that we set aside for the equity fund, at the school level. So that was a shift in the plan. The other piece that will be coming into play over the next couple of years at the end of this biennium is in 2021, the legislature waived the growth performance target requirement as part of the legislation. And the ODE is taking this year to kind of determine what that looks like. And districts will be working with the ODE and their DSDs to determine what the growth targets need to be for our particular investments. And then likely those will be implemented in 22, 23. So
we've got a ways to go basically before we have to cross that bridge.
yeah, this goes through biennium. I'm assuming perhaps there might be another chance to update the plan, going into 22.
Got it. Thank you. Other questions?
So are we anticipating that next year we'll be able to do more of that hiring, or do we anticipate seeing more similar complications?
Yeah, so I think we shared in the board update the most recent economic forecast, and the corporate activity taxes, I believe, were up 750 million or something like that. So likely there's going to be money in the coffers to continue at least the incremental cost growth that we need to do everything that's going to come. That's my
Vice Chair Lynn?
outlook.
Sorry. I have to apologize. I have to leave to pick up kids. My wife is a nurse and is being asked to stay late, so I've got to run. But thank you very much for your report.
We totally understand, Marvin. Thank you.
These things happen.
Other questions from board members? All right, hearing none, thank you both for the presentation. And with that, we will close our reports and discussion section of the agenda and move to our first action item of the evening, which is Board Resolution 212211, the Art Rutkin Dressel Real Estate Purchase. And Director David Moore is presenting.
Yes, so Resolution 2122-11 is a request for the board to declare a portion of our Art Rutkin Elementary 20 acres as surplus property and approve the sale of that particular property to the landowners directly to the north of our 20 acres for an amount of just over $133,000 plus basically all costs associated with the transaction, including the district's own attorney fees. And just to give some background, when the property was purchased by the district, those landowners already own the property to the north of us and developed their backyard that encroached just onto the 20 acres. So the agreement that we came to with the landowners is to sell them that portion of the property, and basically, like I said, they would pay for all costs related to the sale. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions. There isn't a lot more to share, but maybe more detailed questions.
I think I'm reading this correctly, but I just want to confirm on the record that the district will incur zero costs of any kind due to this transfer.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask, how was the value of this sale determined? Was there an independent appraisal?
I'm sorry, Director.
How was the dollar amount of the sale price determined?
So it's on a square footage basis, $14.54 a square foot, of just over 9,000 square feet. And that was the same rate per square foot that we paid for the property that's to the northwest of our property to put in the city required improvements.
And then,
That was about a year ago or so.
yeah, and so the land value per square foot has not changed significantly in that time? Or are we
It
just
might
doing
have
it
a
for
little bit, but
simplicity?
kind of early on, we came to agreement on that rate.
And then where will the proceeds of this sale go? Will they be in our capital fund?
Yeah,
for
they
our
will go
use?
into our land sale of capital projects.
Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion. And quick clarifying question, we don't need a second because there's 4 of us, is that correct?
That's correct.
Correct.
I move to adopt resolution 2122-11, declaring a portion of the Art Rutkin Elementary property as surplus property and approving the sale of the transfer of property per Exhibit A, the agreement, for an amount of $133,578.98, plus all costs associated with the transfer of the parcel.
Motion has been made by Director Zerschmidt. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we will move to a choral vote. All those in favor of adopting the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Thank you, Director Moore. And for our final action item of the evening, we have the Bond Oversight Committee appointment. Director Moore, it's up again.
Thank you. Yes, since the end of last year, the business of the Bond Oversight Committee has been pretty quiet, but we've had 2 vacancies on that committee from the board appointed portion. So at the beginning of the Bond Oversight Committee, when we first convened back in 2017, we had 7 community appointed members plus the 2 board members on the committee. And we've had a little bit of changeover, but not much. But at the end of last year, the chair at the time, she stepped down, Calista Fitzgerald, and then we had an earlier resignation due to a member moving out of the district earlier that year. So the committee had some discussion at the last meeting, and the current committee is very cohesive and works well together, but also has those hard conversations when there might be a difference of opinion. But their recommendation is that we try to fill these 2 vacancies. So we went through 2 rounds of postings. Believe it or not, we only got 1 application. And it happened to be an application from a committee member who is a colleague of at least a couple others that were on the committee, including the outgoing president. And so well qualified, works in the architecture field, and we have at least 1 or 2 of those on the current group. And I think the recommendation is to make that appointment to the side of legal and the possibility of posting later, convene the committee, which we will on December 1st for our next meeting, and directors Irvin and Zerschmidt are the board representatives for that committee. There can be further discussion at that point later while we will try to continue filling the process.
Board members, any comments or questions? I think this applicant has a really impressive resume, and I'm excited that she's offered to step forward. My one question, Director Moore, is for the Bond Oversight Committee. This Bond Oversight Committee is specific to the bond that was passed. It does not apply to a future bond. We would start a new committee at that point.
Yeah, there's the one thing that was talked about by the formal board representatives of the committee as a whole last year is we're going to be wrapping up soon around the next phase of long-range planning and bond planning. So the hope was that the current members can process, even one of those, the community group is involved in the process, and perhaps if they want to continue being part of the future bond oversight committee, we can consider it too.
That's kind of what I was getting at, is because, do you know, is her name pronounced Amalia? Amalia, because she's coming on at the end of this bond, it might be useful to have her continue on into the next bond oversight when the time comes, knock on wood. All right, with that, unless there's any other questions, I'd entertain a motion.
I move to appoint Amelia Moore to the Bond Oversight Committee.
All right, the motion has been made by Director Jaimes. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll move to a choral vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you, Director Moore. And to all who observed, happy Thanksgiving. Thank you for bearing with us this evening, and we'll see you on the other side of the holiday. Meeting is adjourned at 8:56.